Hello, welcome to another episode of Back to the City. This is a part 2, essentially, or really a part 3, because there are 2 previous Back to the City episodes where I'm talking with Sam Robertson, who is here, about the illustrated Old Testament. Today, we're also joined by Dan Dukic, who is also, it's your second time on Back to the City.
Yeah, about 10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the last time.
And before we were talking about your music, you created some music for this, but also did all of the sound design.
Yeah.
And I love the theme song to the podcast. We should establish what we're talking about today. Is Birth of a Salesman, which of course references Death of a Salesman. I like in some of these materials that you shared as the intentional. There's a sentence about Death of a Salesman. So let's begin with that.
Sure.
And just focus on the title. I'll play the theme song, which I love, and we'll use the contrast with Death of a Salesman and the Willy Loman character to begin establishing what this podcast is and what you guys are achieving with it. If the play Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller contains 2 overlapping eras, one of Willy Loman's youthful visions of success and boundless opportunity, and the other of the crushing bewilderment of how things went so wrong and why he became washed up, unrespected and broke. Birth of a Salesman contains mostly youthful, over-the-top optimism. And the Sam character is so wonderfully earnest. He's given all kinds of advice about how to sell his book, some of it better than others. But he laps it all up and he executes things and has boundless energy. And obviously, knowing you, there's a lot of overlap between you and this character. But to me, it seems centrally important that the Sam character, who is trying not just to sell. So here's the premise. Now with book sales starting to dwindle, Sam sets out to become a successful door-to-door Bible salesman. Not only that, though, with the dream of one day selling his illustrated Old Testament to the Pope and then getting the Vatican to buy all 257 paintings for $1 million.
Yeah. Well, it should be said that Sam actually did illustrate the Old Testament in real life.
Absolutely, yes.
This person here, Sam, illustrated the Old Testament. It took him 7 years to illustrate the book.
Yes.
It was published in Minneapolis on, what was the name of the
1111
Yep.
Press?
Yeah, 1111 Press. This is the book.
Yeah, just to
show.
It's a real live book with actual illustrations that Sam made.
It's it's a book.
Checks out.
Showing people.
Yeah, just to say that, this comes from a real place, and that the trying to find a way to sell this book. How many years after you've made it? It's been
out for like 2 years now.
Yeah, so there's this auto-fictitious thing going on in the podcast, and Sam really has tried to contact the Vatican, and what else to say? I mean, just about the real life seeping into this.
In the podcast, when Sam contacts the Vatican, he is surprised that someone's speaking a foreign language. And then he realizes afterwards, in foreign countries they often do speak different languages. I wonder which one this is. Now I need to figure out what this is and learn whatever the language. Oh, it must be Italian.
The actress that played it is an Italian speaker, and the conversation that it's actually a hotel, because I just assume that I can look up the number to the Vatican, but it's a hotel in Vatican City that I found. So she's trying to figure out what's going on in the conversation.
Okay, so little Sam, the character, is unaware that he has not at that point successfully contacted the Vatican because he doesn't understand Italian.
Right.
But Sam, the actual human, has contacted the Vatican?
Did I make that up?
Oh, I have. I've tried to reach out to them through postcards and just online and stuff to no success yet, but it's not, I haven't given up.
Keep trying. And
Pen pal.
this is just
Yeah,
season one, isn't it? Of,
Yeah.
of Birth of a Salesman.
Yes.
So going back to Willie Loman.
Yeah.
It was helpful to have this contrast here in between Sam and Willie. How and when did you decide to name the podcast Birth of a Salesman? And
Well,
what's the significance of that
It
contrast?
came up, I've had that name for a while, it just hit me one day. It was Birth of a Salesman, not Death of a Salesman. I never read Death of a Salesman yet. But then after I realized...
It's like the Old Testament. You hadn't read the Old Testament when
Right.
you started illustrating it.
Exactly. So I bought a copy and read it and was like, thought it was a really good play. And yeah, I was really interested in his like you were saying, the youthful optimism being met by like the crushing exhaustion of like the world moving on, not needing him anymore, just like leaving him out to dry, and I felt like kindred spirit in the optimism part, because like to be an artist in this day and age, like you kind of have to have a thick skin because of all of like personally like failures and things not working, having events where like 2 people show up, or like just like constantly met with exhausting and demoralizing situations, and like they're crushing, and then you like somehow wake up and you're ready to try something else, and it's just like I felt like a kindred spirit to Willie Loman, but also to salesmen in general, because like you have to be kind of a salesman to get your art out there. Like you have to like believe in it enough to be convincing to other people, and to like convince yourself to keep producing.
Absolutely, yeah.
So like the salesman is like as like an archetype is in for like the thrill of the hunt kind of, and so I just like feeling sympathy for like salesmen out there.
Yeah.
You know, especially doing the door-to-door part and being met with all the rejection.
Right. One of the people who advises Sam, essentially advises Sam not to feel any emotions. So when you're experiencing that rejection, it's very important not to feel any emotions.
Right. On the line of like, can I
it's
feel
alien.
optimism? He's like, yeah, that emotion's
That
okay.
emotion's okay, yeah. So it captures the alienation of that constant grind, really. And but he remains optimistic throughout. And even at the end, so I've listened to all 5 of the episodes. I highly recommend that people do. It comes out in
April
few
2nd.
days. April 2nd.
So by the time this is released, it'll be out.
And they all came out together on that same day. So
The first 2 will come out April 2nd, and each one, the other 3 episodes will come out each week.
each week,
So
okay.
it'll be out when the month of April's done. The first season will have all been released.
Yeah, so episode 1, Sam gets a fan mail P.O. box, and episode 2, Sam has a slumber party with Dennis, which is one of my favorite episodes. Are presently out. Dennis is played by Skylar Nowinski from the controversial New Skinny Pill. And I think that the closing song on that episode is also the controversial New Skinny Pill, which you also play in, is that correct?
That's right,
Yes.
I play bass guitar.
And so how did, and the first episode, the song at the end of that is Robot Kid?
Yeah.
Yeah?
They're played by another actor, or made by another actor in the show.
Oh,
played by,
which character?
Josh Ingersoll plays Colton Caldwell Boone.
Oh.
And he's
The Nemesis.
Yeah, he's the nemesis.
he's the nemesis.
But don't want to give away too much
Yes.
of the plot, but yeah.
Yeah.
He's got a band. What's his band?
His band, he goes by
Robot?
Sir Joshua Robert.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I like the lyrics to that song with which episode 1 closes. So there's this robot kid. You played with me like your little toy, I needed something to destroy. How did you select the particular songs?
Well, we needed copyright-free music, and all of the actors, most of the actors
Are in bands.
are in bands
Miami
and make
Dolphins
music.
is another one of the bands,
None of the people from that band are in the show or in the podcast,
But they're your friends.
but they're our friends, yeah, and they allowed us to use their song. And that one just felt, you had that idea like pretty early on.
For Robot Boy?
Yeah.
For Robot Boy, yeah, for the first episode.
And why Robot Boy for closing the first episode?
Robot Kid, I think.
Robot Kid, yeah.
It just felt thematically to fit, in kind of like a little step outside of the world of Birth of a Salesman, but yeah, just it fit thematically somehow, and it was, I feel like, a really powerful song, and it's I don't know, just feels really captivating and follows some of the same themes of the podcast.
Yeah. A central theme, I think, throughout the podcast is not only birth, but rebirth. And there are multiple times when things seem to have gone entirely catastrophically wrong for Sam. And yet, even more than just putting a positive spin on it, he feels better. So, for example, again, without giving too much away of the plot, there's one episode ends with him needing to ride a bicycle instead of the previous mode of transportation. And there's this wonderful narration of him riding a bicycle, and he feels reborn. And this is one of a number of instances where he's lost something that seems absolutely essential.
Yeah.
And yet, that loss is tied up with this feeling more animated, feeling newly alive, which is thematically relevant to the Bible. I like the word metanoia, which in modern translations it generally gets translated as repentance, but the original word means something along the lines of a turning of the mind, like a shift in consciousness.
Yeah.
And so, could you either or both of you expand a bit on the rebirth theme, and perhaps how that might relate to the idea of conversion, like a shift in consciousness, which seems relevant to the book.
Yeah.
Bible.
Well, I think the interesting thing about this is that it all comes from meeting people. So let's just ruin the whole plot.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, that's
Why not?
fine. It's
Yeah.
fine. You'll listen to it again, I'm sure. Sam's truck gets stolen, and he needs to find a new mode of transportation. And he, out in his journeys, meets a bike mechanic, and then they trade a bike for a Bible, and so there's just this. Meeting people and being willing to be affected by people you meet, and so I think the rebirth,
The encounters.
encounters,
True encounters.
and like that rebirth of your consciousness is not just your own, but there's a collectiveness, and that like there's a very strong sense of like the need for community in this podcast, which all of the people that Sam's meeting are just. But anytime an actor would come in to read a part, we would kind of give them the brief that in this world, people go out of their way to help Sam. And they're
They
generally
either
like
harshly reject him.
yeah,
Or
yes, you want like the hidden mic interactions from real people. We hear the indifference or rejection.
Yes.
But Sam made a world where people have a sense of wonderment and a huge supply of curiosity and want to help people and want to connect to people. And so the rebirth that I think that you're catching on to, in my mind, it's because he's meeting people, and he's getting out into the community, and like what could have been just his truck got stolen, now he's out of luck. He went and met somebody, and it just so happens like we could trade a Bible for a bike. Sam, like
Yeah, I think it's like a collaboration effort that I've experienced in real life too.
Yes.
Where the Old Testament was like a solo project. I was by myself
Yeah.
working on it for 7 years, but then opening up the door to collaborating with Dan on this. And just to be clear, Dan wears a lot of hats in this episode. He's the narrator, sound designer, does the music, production, and he also like edited the script and brought in a lot of the actors because he's more in the acting community because he does sound design for plays and theater and other forms of media. I think he's done a podcast before or something, TV show. But so like opening myself up to collaboration and just like things were like awesome coincidences and things start unfolding when you open yourself up to collaboration.
Yeah, we talked about good orderly direction or
Yes,
flow
I
in the
think about that
previous
a lot
episode.
still.
Yeah.
Yeah, the good orderly direction. Just like one example is I needed some red velvet for this briefcase that I already showed you, but I was like working at a fireplace. I was like installing fireplaces, and you go to a different house every day and put in a fireplace and vent it out and connect it to gas or whatever you need to do. And I saw this lady had like fabric around, and I was just like, do you have any red velvet? Because I'm trying to upholster my briefcase, and she's like, you like red velvet? I love red velvet.
It's just like being in the...
Yeah, it was just
exactly.
like exactly like that. So then she just hooked me up with the exact amount of red velvet that I needed for this. Not one scrap more. It was just like exactly what I needed. And I never.
Wow. Yeah.
So like that kind of stuff, I feel like doesn't always happen, but I feel like it happened in this podcast where like each of the actors had something to bring, and like some would say like, what if we said this instead?
I was wondering about that. So, like, for example, I think Skylar, as Dennis, calls to order a pizza at one moment. And then in the phone conversation, it transpires that someone at the restaurant got angry and, like, jumped on a pizza or something along those
Started
lines.
throwing pizza around.
on the ground.
And
Yeah.
I wondered to what extent that was improvised, or
That
to
was
what
all
extent
scripted, but it was based on an event that actually happened where I was at like Delano's Pizza or something before it closed on Lake Street, I think.
Yeah.
Eating the buffet, some guy comes in barefoot, takes a pizza, slams it on the ground, says, "This is the worst pizza I've had in my whole life," and is just chucking the pizza at like the workers, everyone at like it sticks on the lamps up above, and he's just rampaging for 10 minutes before he just leaves, and then the cops come like, and he just had left already. But it was like, so that was based on a real situation that happened. So that was kind of like when writing it, bringing up like some of those kind of moments in my life, you know, like the really surreal ones to begin with, and then like kind of weaving them into the plot a little bit.
Yeah, and in that moment, there's dysfunction and a lack of connection. So it's like it's a contrast with the functional, wholesome, coming together collaboration that's also spotlighted. So once he has the bike, another instance of people showing up and just wanting to assist.
Right.
This Tanya character says, "I want to help however I can. I really believe in your project." And it's really fun. Like she says, "You should have a helmet. I have a spare helmet. Take care of yourself."
Yeah.
She then puts air. Let me put some air in the tires, she says, and then there's immediately the sound effect of air being put in the tires. She gives him a milk crate so that his new lawn signs that he's been encouraged to get by someone else can be carried around. Yeah, it's lovely. It's the willingness of the people to show up and support the project.
Strangers, you know, becoming close like that instantly.
So how did you decide that was a key component of this universe?
The strangers helping.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I wanted it to be part interactive in the real world. So like what people are helping with is often giving me ideas for promoting my book. So it starts off with Dennis. Well, first, Cody Maloney, my sales guru, who I met in high school, but he doesn't remember me very well, but I remember him. I find his name in the phone book, so I call him. And one of the first things he recommends doing is getting a fan mail P.O. box, because he's telling me that it's good to have because people want to connect with people, and they'll start the fan mail will start flooding in. But he also tells me, after my first failed attempt going door to door, where nobody was at all interested, he encourages me to conduct a survey. So I have and then bring the material to the next time I go door to door. So I did make that. So in real life, I go door to door with this. So like I'd knock and try to sell my Bible and say, no, not yet. Like, check out my survey that I conducted, and it like goes just like, do you have any? Some of them I say, do you have any enemies or a nemesis? And then, like, because I actually conducted a survey with people that bought the book. And then if you answered yes to the previous question, do you think recommending this book to him or her might smooth things over between you? So I'm reading this to, like, the people at their door, and they're, like, confused.
And so how likely do you think it would be to make you guys actual friends if you gave this book to your nemesis, the Old Testament that I illustrated? Some said very likely. Most said it wouldn't make us friends, but it
Makes some, but there's just like a lot of.
Colton, it doesn't have to be this way. It's a line in there.
Yeah.
That's addressed to the Nemesis character.
Right.
It's kind of just like a way to move the plot, because some people, like Dennis recommends I get a website, and we look for it together, because he just finished a online boot camp for web design, and so it's like, it helps because he needs pro bono experience, so it helps make a business card, and we get my website, we like,
AmericasBible.com,
Yeah,
which
and-
you actually do have.
right, so like in the episode, we find AmericasBible.com. Buy the domain, we have it, and then I get it in real life too. So that's like the main website for this project, AmericasBible.com.
Yeah, so which you can go to, viewers, and it says the official Bible of America.
Yeah.
And a character, you receive an email within the podcast where it says, "This isn't the official Bible of America. You're just saying that to look good. I hate you."
Yeah. So yeah, there's some of that. Yeah. Other ones is I do get business cards, and then they're delivered in an episode, and the postal worker that gives them to me is just like really eager to wait for me to open it in front of her, because she likes to see people open their packages. So another example of just people being kind and helpful, but
DMV.
DMV, I was hoping to get a DMV advertisement, like is in the plot of the show, but it was pointed out to me that the DMV advertisements, you have to go through some like shady company in California. They have to like approve the DMV advertisements even here.
Oh.
So it seems really convoluted. I haven't given up on it completely. I would still like to advertise at the DMV, because the DMV is where I finished reading the Old Testament for illustrating it. So
And we're inspired to do the final image, which involves feces,
yeah, there's a
which is
passage where
in the podcast too. There's a whole
Yeah. Natanya.
yeah, because the last illustration in the Old Testament is from Malachi, where God threatens to wipe poop on people's faces as punishment, and then like I forget, they have to eat their children or something too. But that's the last painting, and that's what I read in the DMV, and then I knew that was gonna be the last illustration. So DMV is like an important location. And I just like, when I was there, seeing all the advertisements flashing on the screens, I was like, this is the perfect place to advertise, because everybody has to go to the DMV.
When Tanya says that in the podcast, she expands, it's one of the few things left that unite us as a species. Which is funny because it's funny and thematically relevant, because we're presented with this salesman character trying to succeed in a culture where a lot of things seem to be broken down, and there isn't a lot. Doesn't seem to be a lot of connection, or so that the guy throwing the pizza is kind of indicative or like an example of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of also like reflecting on like how individualistic our society is.
Yes.
Kind of you're like out on your own to make it or break it through your own devices, like forgetting the community element, how we're all connected.
Yes.
And just like, yeah, it's kind of like a push against, this podcast is sort of like a push against that that calling that's kind of put on us
Yeah.
in this consumerist culture to like sell everything, to sell yourself, like through the gig economy, through whatever, just like to hustle and make ends meet as like just the social structure is being undermined at every corner by just politicians trying to gut everything, you know, and take away the support network. And I'm not like the most eloquent on that subject matter, but it's like a feeling.
Yeah, we all live in it.
Yeah.
So yeah. And I just think it's brilliant how you point that out by showing the opposite. And that's what's, to me, is really funny about
Even
the
as Sam is, like, even as the character is trying to live the American dream in that way.
Yep.
And even at the end of the final episode in season 1, it's highlighting that the salesman cannot look back with every book sold or enemy made. They don't look back. They can't afford to. Self-pity is not rewarded in this culture. So even though he is trying to live that dream, he's so good-hearted that we find him enjoying riding on his bike and just making these meaningful connections. The idea of the death of the self is relevant too, because it turns out that not only has he lost his truck, but everything that he needs as a tradesman to do his like primary job has also been lost.
Yeah.
But then he ends up celebrating the death of Sam the tradesman, so that he can be reborn as full-time Bible salesman.
Yeah, completely.
So that's a slightly, I suppose it's connected, of course, to the rebirth theme. But the idea of like the death of like past selves or shedding skins. How does that component fit in?
Yeah, I guess, the most jarring moments in people's lives, I guess, leave you grasping for what's next, so you're kind of forced into, like, rebirths, or, like, and the jarring experiences are not all created equal. Like, some are too much to bounce back from, but if, like, for whatever reason in your history you're in the right place to not get completely like drowned by the experience of like hardship, of a certain hardship, if for whatever reason you're like able to bounce back from, like, everyone has so many blows in their life that takes a while to come back from, but they're just like the moments when everything gets shaken up, you know, and you really do have to like either reach out to your community or reach deep into yourself to try to emerge from. I guess it's just they're really like moments of almost like poetry or something, where you just you just have to figure out what restructuring needs to happen to keep your head on straight. I don't know.
Beautifully said. beautifully said. Man.
Something else that's beautiful is the pamphlet.
Yeah.
Those.
Yes.
Got some pamphlets.
And I bet that are they folded just like Tanya likes to
Trifold.
fold them?
Yeah, Shelley,
there they are.
Shelley.
Shelley.
So
Yeah.
Shelley, this is in that episode. This is her favorite, almost form of art. She loves making pamphlets. So she makes it in the podcast, but I just really made this one. So it's got the book, about the book, and then testimonials, and then about the birth of the Salesman podcast, and then where to find your copy, and then in the podcast I go to churches and drop these off in stacks and try to talk to the people in the congregation. And I haven't done that yet, but that's the plan with these in part, is to make a circuit around the Twin Cities and deliver these to the churches.
At the beginning of the final episodes, those pamphlets are towering in a stack, like a loyal Labrador. And then it's a very, very, very extended metaphor involving the possibility of the loyal Labrador being able to have a dead bird in its mouth if it's lucky. And then, once that metaphor is done, then it's also like a peacock. And then the attributes of a peacock are listed.
Some of my favorite things was just trying to do the narration in the podcast and just reading some of these things as is that Sam just wrote and just being like, yeah, just going with it.
Is it just a feature of your writing style, or is there a significance of these elaborate extended metaphors? It's a very prominent stylistic feature.
Yeah.
And I just wondered what the effusive metaphorical thinking for that, if there's a special significance to that.
I've written a fair amount, and that's kind of the style that I've gravitated towards in this and in like short stories and things I've written. I think it's like fun to write that way, and it's sort of a way to couch that I'm not a great writer, so I can like kind of hide from that I'm not like a technically gifted writer by any means, but like I feel like my brain works more on like metaphors and like visual imagery, and it's just like a way to pile a lot into not exactly a small space because they're pretty rambly, but then and then I just like, since that is kind of an aspect of my character and personality where it's not like to that extreme how I interact with people in the world. It's something that I like, just like plays on words and stuff. And then, yeah, when I heard how Dan was reading it, just like right from the beginning, it was like his delivery, I loved it. And,
Me too.
He just kind of stepped up to the plate, and like as verbose as it is, Dan is also a really like, he's a good editor, and he's like, yeah, like this whole page of that, we like don't need this whole page, where it's like long extended metaphors for like way too long that isn't helping anything. I'm just like, just crushed because I'm like, I know he's right,
Rejected,
but I
once
just
again.
lose the audience, you know?
Yeah.
And again, but he's always right. Like that's like another awesome part of the collaboration is because like I get so in my head and attached to things that aren't worth it to have in there. So like Dan knew how to like cut that out, and like parts that were weak, like the motivation behind the nemesis. Like I had written the 5th episode, and he like was just gently like, there needs to be like probably something more about why the nemesis hates Sam so much. And he
I
didn't,
like what you came up with.
and so he didn't. I'm not going to spoil that.
Yes,
'cause that's like
exactly.
That's
Me
like
neither.
That's the end. But Dan has like a way of gently but forcefully saying like, this part should be addressed, and then like then that is good for me because then I like really think about it, and he's always right, and then he doesn't like interject and like, unless I asked him to write a part or two or like to tweak a part, he would do that, but he would just like, this part needs changing, and then it would help me to realize.
Something else that I really love about the narration is that often it is like a guided meditation, essentially.
Yeah.
And it's very immersive, So at the very beginning, I'll play a clip of the very beginning.
Cool.
Right now. So here is a clip of the very beginning.
Written and conceived by Sam Robertson.
Do you hear these footsteps? Who do you think is making them? Sam is. He illustrated the King James Old Testament. It took him 7 years. And with the help of a very, very brave small publisher, a big 520-page hardcover book was born. Now, do you see the briefcase Sam is holding? It's got a big red heart painted on it, swaying as he walks with butterflies in his stomach and sweat soaking into his fancy suit. Okay, now peek inside the briefcase with me. Red velvet caresses one of these books to keep it from wiggling around way too much and getting all dinged up. The one in the briefcase is copy number 150. It's Sam's copy, but it's also the one people get to hold and flip through to behold the magnitude, so they can think about if maybe they want to obtain one for themselves or as a gift for a loved one. Gold foil stamps adorn both the dust jacket and the actual book cover. It's 9 inches tall by 12 inches wide, and it's even got a classy red bookmark ribbon to save your page in the sea of illustrations and text. Nearly 260 illustrations are nestled lovingly within the entire text of the Old Testament. It probably weighs 6 pounds, but no one knows for sure yet. Now, flip through with me. There's page after page after page of vivid modern paintings meditating upon the human condition. The illustrations interpret the ancient words of the Bible in a way the people of today can perhaps relate to, while still somehow maintaining a timeless quality. Sam captured the love and beauty buried deep within the words, and he highlighted the allegiances and extraordinary vengeances and grudges that God patiently fostered with mankind. His ultimate creation. From Genesis to Malachi, and in the 37 books between, it seems to almost go on for— Oh!
Hey, slow down! You almost killed me!
So here we are back again after that opening sequence. This immersive quality, which is there right from the beginning, actually by the very end, it becomes more like guided meditation. The listener at the very end of the final episode is invited to listen to my voice and focus on your breath. Focus on your breath. Pay attention to your breath. Listen to my voice. Listen to my breath.
I wondered if that was a typo.
It's delivered so well.
No, that's it. Let's keep that.
Is this kind of guided meditation style component intentional? Did that come out more during the process of creating it?
I think that's the script I just delivered. Yeah, I tend to play the narrator like a youth pastor, kind of like an excited youth pastor with that kind of quality, and then just to
Well, it suits.
yeah, and then to like play into the
thing, doesn't it?
medium too. Like, I don't think either of us really listen to podcasts. So we've never really listened to a podcast before making this one. But I think it was, I don't know, maybe that was Sam's impetus to use sound as a way to bring people into the story.
It fits with the theme of connection.
Yeah,
Again,
yeah.
an encounter. We're encountering and being spoken to directly by the narrator there.
Yeah.
I think both that component and these effusive metaphors
Yeah.
really they fit thematically because they're to do with, rather than being attached and kind of clenched and closed.
Yeah.
That connection and
Yeah.
making these links.
Totally.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, my girlfriend Chelsea, who plays Tanya, she listens more to podcasts, and she was just saying like, people aren't gonna hear everything that is said. Like they're gonna be cleaning their house and doing whatever else. And so I think it like strikes a good balance of like rambling metaphor and then plot and these like hidden microphone interactions. There's just like a lot of different things where like I think people can kind of in like true podcast fashion come in and out of their attention being paid. So yeah, hopefully maybe these meditation moments will like bring people back into it or something after they're done like cleaning the fridge or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the other aspects of his character that some of the funniest parts to me is so there's like those extended metaphors and moving the plot along, but he also like takes some like cheap shots at me too, which I think a lot of people, myself included, I like have some negative self-talk going on in my head around a few things, and it's funny because like he is like my subconscious sort of in the show, so he also like takes some stabs at my self-worth kind of, and like laughs a little bit, but is like mostly really nice. But there's just like a couple, he just like sneaks those in, and it's like.
Can you think of an example?
Well, there's a moment where Sam needs to bend down to grab something, and the narrator's just. This is just like this. Sam wrote this. I didn't add this. It was just like he's really unflexible, and then he like chuckles like, yeah, he can barely touch his toes.
Oh, yes,
and just
that's
like
right.
yeah. So it's just, and like that was just added because I like seeing Sam's like just authentic negative talk that we all do is just like that. Let's just put that in as like give that a point of view with the narrator. Like
Yeah.
let's
Other
give that a
parts
point.
that have like no worldly skills or something like that, that everything kind of exists in a fantasy world, like, and it doesn't, I'm just not like a functional member of the society, like contributing anything of value kind of, which is like kind of,
It's your worst fears playing out. It's your
yeah, it's like, so you're like, well, there's a couple things like that, but
This makes me think of the book Man's Search for Meaning. Do you know? Have you ever encountered that book before? Viktor Frankl's book, and he talks about the wisdom. It's related to this, like the negative self-talk, but it's therapeutic, according to Viktor Frankl in that book, to sometimes counterintuitively give more voice to that, and exaggerate it to an extreme,
Right.
and it strips it of its power.
100%.
Is that something that's happening here? Is it almost so rather than just like taking it, like being mean to yourself?
Yeah.
Is there something like the use of that particular use of humor?
that's a good point. Yeah, I think maybe it was kind of cathartic to put those in there and like
roast yourself?
yeah, and kind of step aside from the actual feelings and like exaggerate them a little bit.
Right.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Good connection.
Yeah. It seems to be like a real something really positive can come from that particular use of humor.
Right.
And so we're talking about shame, I think, here with the negative self-talk, and that comes up briefly in the podcast too, where the character Sam, he's decided, okay, shame in particular is certainly not an emotion that I'm allowed to feel, and so he's saying at one moment, no more shame. Okay, I'm done with shame. I'm still blushing actually, but that will eventually go away. So it's I like how the podcast keeps on returning to these very serious existential predicaments, like the problem of shame, and the kind of trite solutions, like just don't feel feelings.
Yeah.
Let time pass. It'll go away.
For shame.
And, like, so biblical too in a lot of ways. Like the shame element is like runs through the Bible.
Certainly the Old Testament,
The Old
with
Testament,
the
yeah.
punitive
Yeah,
God
so I
figure,
feel like there's some shout outs to the actual text that inspired this whole project in that way. But yeah, it does kind of, there's some themes that it keeps coming back to kind of.
But again, it seems like the human connection is, if anything, is an antidote to shame.
Yeah.
Then Sam showing up and being seen, he's so earnest, then some of the people that he's encountering want to join forces with him. So it does, in my experience too, the courage to kind of show up and be oneself.
Yeah.
That does kind of help to.
Totally. Yeah,
to
what
get
better
through shame.
connection than shame and failure and
Yeah.
rejection that we've all experienced and that
yes,
we
and
can all
it's
connect to.
leveling.
Yeah, completely. It's like we can all agree that we've experienced those things. And so, yeah.
And I feel like, that too opens the door, those moments where somebody did something shameful happened or something tragic or unfortunate. Like, in my life, those have been like moments of connection where I'm like really drawn to when someone's feeling that way or something happened, to connect, share a similar thing that happened to me, and just kind of like, I feel like I've like loved it when friends have done that with me, but for some reason that's how I've always like, I almost like, it's part of my like inner gossip too, because like I don't like take what people say and confide in me and like share it, but I like to know like what things happen to people, just like because of my just curiosity about humans and stuff. But and then I like to, it feels like the hatches are open then, and I can just share something too that happened to me, like to make a connection in those moments. So I feel like
Sam
as
is an
hard as
everyman character, isn't he? I think in the podcast.
yeah.
It seems another crucial component.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, those are just kind of like rich moments in living in a society of connection where like you do expose your weaknesses and then they're met with like understanding and
Vulnerability. Yeah.
yeah.
Completely. Yeah. It's also really funny when people screw up and like, it's like completely,
Definitely.
yeah.
Something that struck me is I wondered whether what I'm about to highlight was is intentional or not. But Tanya really likes the final image, again the poop one.
Mm-hmm.
And something that she likes about it is that there are all of the crowd that are really into it. They're kind of celebrating. How she describes it in the foreground.
Yeah, because the curtain's closing. If it helps, I can show from the book.
Please, yeah.
So, but it's like the last painting. I don't know if we can zoom in, if this will even show up with the lights and stuff, but there's a crowd here in the foreground cheering as the curtains are closing. It's like the last act of the play, and God's wiping, this one's God, and he's wiping poop on this guy's face, and there's like the shame of the plug toilet and the plunger and stuff. So yeah, that's the scene she's describing.
And she's like, oh, they're really into it. She likes it. And then the podcast ends with a bunch of, well, season one rather of the podcast ends, with a bunch of skaters celebrating. They're really into Sam's jump that he does.
Yeah.
And they're applauding him. And it struck me as nice that both the
I
book
didn't even make that connection.
and the podcast end
not
with these
intentional.
applauding people.
Yeah, well, thanks for noticing that.
Really into it. I love it.
Not intentional.
And a pamphlet happens to, this is the good orderly directional flow in action. It falls out of his pocket or his, whatever, the bike.
Yeah, his bike, and the leader of the skating crew grabs it, and
He's
you can tell he's going to look at it later.
Yeah,
maybe
and
consider
certainly
buying a
buy
Bible.
Yeah.
So it's, I really like how, as much as the podcast certainly doesn't encourage us to like buy into the, the conventional American dream, And yet, it kind of demonstrates the universe as such that when someone good-hearted like Sam does show up to do something, then the pamphlets do end up where they're supposed to be.
Right.
And I like that feature
Yeah.
of it, that it depicts the universe as such.
Yeah. I feel like I have moments in my life where that's the case. Yeah, it rings true to me. It's not like completely a made-up thing. Like it just feels like like you're traveling or just out meeting people can be. There's a really good line of, I think at the end of episode 1, where the narrator says something about like, can you think of a time in your life when you've met a stranger that's completely redirected the course of your life? And I feel like I thought about that, and I could think of some moments. Yeah, completely. So it really rings true. Yep.
Yep.
It's not all fiction.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that on steroids, this show, but that's so true. Yeah, and when you're walking around or biking or needing to sleep somewhere on a tour or something like that, that is kind of when those interactions are accelerated because you're like really out there, on a limb, and then the kindness of people shows when they take you in and stuff like that. So I feel like this is a person going out on a limb in the world ready to receive him.
Do we have the plot of season 2 determined yet?
I took some I have pages of notes on which direction it could go, but we kind of were just focused on making sure this happens.
Absolutely.
And seeing this through, and then trying to find how to fund another season, and considered having it on another podcast platform or something with more structure for getting out there, or maybe like a TV show or something, go in that direction. But I don't know. We got a lot of ideas for ways it can go, and look forward to the time where I can sit down and plug away at another more writing for this.
Excellent. One last thing. When you were previously on talking about the book itself, you used the metaphor, you exercised a lot of self-control. It was a very short metaphor of the lost, ageless, estranged child. And because you had never read the entire Old Testament before doing the project, and it wasn't a book that had a massive impact on you, insofar as you had obviously encountered it in our culture. You talked about the process of creating the book as, starting off as like an orphan to history, and then in the podcast, or actually rather in the materials that you shared, there's another baby metaphor. And it says, much like a newborn has no concept of its genetic composition in the previous eons that crafted its standing existence, I have no concept of the history of the Old Testament, only that I'm trying to get 5 decades after the heyday of door-to-door Bible sales. I just wondered if you had anything, if you could expand more on perhaps in relation to the rebirth theme and the death of certain identities. Whether you have more to say about this image of being like the estranged child. We talked about kind of the prodigal son story in the previous interview, and kind of finding a home within the Bible as you were illustrating it. Do you have more to... I'll give you an opportunity to expand on your metaphor.
Well, I guess I think it's just like a kind of a funny and timely premise to have this book that has been arguably the most formative book to Western culture, the Old Testament, that is shaped even how we parent, and vengeance and retribution and punishment and all this stuff, to just be, because the God depicted as this angry, vengeful God that has culminated into this like this society of punishment and all this stuff, but to have like no understanding of that book and to have like missed the heyday of Bible sales. And one thing I didn't mention is that I'm dressed like a Bible salesman from the 70s as I'm going door to door where people are meeting me. So like it's like a, what's the word, like anachronism or whatever.
Anachronism,
where it's
yeah.
like something from a different time, just being born into this time period. And there's been so much profiting from the Old Testament. Like it's obviously had some good effect, and people have learned and how to be good people through reading it and stuff like that. But it's also been this like profit driving item, you know, whether or not you believe in its like origin and its truth. People have just like made a ton of money off of it, and through direct sales or through using it to convince societies to act in certain ways and to get people to rally around a book as a form of control. Like they can control the population now, you know, or back in the day or whatever. But just like something about that concept where there's this book that I don't understand, but I'm just like in the fumes of the American dream trying to just sell this item that has like unthinkable and unrivaled power and influence in the world. So I'm just like trying to scrape a little bit off of the top of that wave. Too little, too late. Just like, yeah, you know, it's too many words to explain that, but it's just kind of like a poetic vision to base the plot of the story around. Like on the one hand, it doesn't have to be the Old Testament, but it kind of does have to be the Old Testament that this person's selling door to door.
As the episode ends now, I feel like, again, we're in the universe of Birth of a Salesman, because we are about to encounter Adam Worthen in the TV studio, aka Larry Wish, on whose new record you
Put a little bit of guitar on that, yeah. Yes, yeah.
So it is the kind of thing that happens in real life.
That's
These kind
right,
of
yeah.
links and connections. And, so it's lovely. And again, I really, really love that aspect.
Well, you're living it with this show, Simon.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you really highlight a lot of cool people in the community, and just gets hopefully more people working together and making things together. So thanks for having us on this
Yay,
show.
thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, such a great interviewer. You're like, you really do your research and come up with really thought-provoking questions that I don't even know going in. Like, yeah, you make me think, and then that's what I feel like makes for good interviews. And you're doing it.
Thank you.
So thank you so
I
much.
like your
Sam.
speaking voice too. Maybe we can talk about season 2 of if you want to do some
I would
voice
love
acting.
to make an appearance. I remember the end of our previous interview was me offering to help in some ways, and here I am helping in some ways.
Oh man.
Sam, I want to help you however I can. I really believe in your project.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Simon.
You're very welcome.
You're doing it.
This has been Back to the City. I'm Simon Calder. Check out Sam's Bible and on miraclesbible.com, and of course the Birth of a Salesman podcast. We'll be back for another Back to the City at 10 p.m. next Thursday on MCN6, and you can watch it on Roku and stream it at mcn6.org.